Welcome to the Patriotic Pulpit. What a great and resounding victory we had last week. Donald Trump going back to the White House. What a great victory for America. What a great victory for Americans. I think the formula is very, very simple. And that is, the larger the government, the less freedom that we have. The smaller the government, the more freedom that we enjoy. That's a very simple formula that everyone can understand. And that's the reason that we supported Donald J. Trump to be president of the United States. Smaller government equals more freedom. Not only so, but protecting our borders. It is absolutely stunning to me that so many people want open borders, that is, no borders at all. One cannot have a country without some kind of border system, a border that controls the flow of people coming into the nation. Not only that, but the outflow of our money to foreign nations and to people that are coming in here that are not citizens of the United States. What a great victory for the United States, because it equals a smaller government. Donald J. Trump going to erase the deep state, that's his goal, and to get us back to a more sensible size of government, because the founding formula that our founding fathers gave us was simply this, that we control the government, and if we can control it, then we can control our own destiny. But if the government gets so bloated and out of control, then we cannot control our own destiny. And that's exactly why Donald Trump needed to go back to the White House, and why people have awakened to what is actually happening in our country. Now, there are a couple of things regarding the election that I want to notice. And two of these items, I've not heard anyone, to my knowledge at least, speak about these issues as they talk about them on the television, different news channels, on the radio. But two things that I want to notice, and that is the following. Number one, Donald Trump was not a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, what does that mean? That means he was not an internationalist. Neither is J.D. Vance. Neither of them are internationalists. Now, what significance has that? Let's just back up for a moment and notice, all the way back to the time of Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was an internationalist. He wanted a globalist government, and so he was involved in creating, even though it was created without the United States, the League of Nations. And he wanted to be under the aegis of the League of Nations. When there were conservatives, Republicans primarily, in the Congress, who resisted that globalist movement, that globalist effort to put us into a global League of Nations, they resisted because they said it erases our sovereignty. That's exactly what Wilson wanted. That's exactly what the others wanted who are with him. For example, he had many people who were his aides who wanted simply to have a global style government, international, that is, get our foot in the door with internationalism. But that did not happen. Consequently, he had one of his aides who was named Edward Mandell House. Edward Mandell House wrote a book called Philip Drew Administrator, in which he talks about Marxism. He wanted to have Marxism in the United States, or communism. He put it as communism as dreamed of by Karl Marx. Now, that's the kind of man that Wilson had as his closest aide in office. But it does tell us a lot about Woodrow Wilson, because the international movement, that is to erase the sovereignty of the United States, has been occurring for many, many decades. But it was rejected in Wilson's 14-point plan after World War I, and the League of Nations was repudiated by our Congress. But Edward Mandell House went back to the drawing board, and he created two institutions that were internationalist in their organization, internationalist in their scope, and internationalist in their dream, and that is to create a global government to erase the sovereignty of individual nations. And those institutions were, number one, the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as number two, the International Institute of Royal Affairs, I believe it is, in England. So they have two organizations, and that the main one was the Council on Foreign Relations. It so happens that every single president from the time of FDR on and all of their administrative staff have been members of the Council on Foreign Relations. What is the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations? You look it up. It is for global government. Richard Haas, for example, writing in 1974, tells us that he wanted, or the CFR wanted, an end run around national sovereignty. What they have desired is a global-style government, a global governance, as they will call it, and to erase the sovereignty and therefore the borders of every single nation. Look what's happening in Europe, the EU. Great Britain has come to the realization, almost really too late, because the immigrants that are flooding into different nations, and they're losing their sovereignty, and they're losing their culture, they're losing their identity. Look what's happening in Holland, in France, and other countries, and people that are in those countries are vastly worried concerning this globalist move. Now, the point of all of this is simple. Every single president that we have had since the time of Franklin Roosevelt until today, excepting Donald Trump, excepting Ronald Reagan, have been members of the Council on Foreign Relations. What does that mean? That means that they wanted a globalist-style government. They wanted internationalism. They were willing to take billions of dollars from the United States, siphon it off, and send it to international banks to foreign countries. That's what it means. But Donald Trump changed that. People wondered, why does the left hate so much, with so much passion, Donald Trump? This is the answer. Now let's go back to Ronald Reagan for a moment. I was so overjoyed when Ronald Reagan was president. What a great president was Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan, in order, in my estimation, to get into office, he put on board with him a man who was one of the solid internationalists, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, one of the grandfathers of it, and that is George H.W. Bush. He was really one of the leading lights on the Council on Foreign Relations. And when he put him on the ticket, I knew immediately, I thought, you know what? He is seeking, in order to placate the globalists and those who are the neocons in the Republican Party, he's putting George Bush on the ticket with him. And that's exactly what happened. So when Ronald Reagan had an astounding victory and then an astounding second victory, who followed him as president? That was George H.W. Bush. And we went right back into the international channels. Same thing happened regarding Jimmy Carter, earlier than Ronald Reagan. Same thing happened now with Bill Clinton, all members of the CFR. Their entire staff are members of the CFR. That means they're interested first and foremost not with the American people, but with foreign nations and melting us into a United Nations style governance, overseeing and overriding the Constitution of the United States. But all of that changed with Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump was hated his first time in office. Now he's coming into the office the second time, and the left is absolutely unhinged in their hatred for Donald Trump. But where does it come from? It doesn't come from simply the fact that he has mean tweets. It doesn't come from the fact that he is plain spoken, or that he had said some ugly things in a locker room 40 years ago. It comes from the fact that the Democrat Party is completely controlled by socialists, internationalists, and so are so many Republicans who are the neocons of the world. Neocons means simply that they are neoconservative, that is, they are just like watermelon communists, that is green on the outside and red on the inside. They're on the outside, the Republicans, but on the inside, they are socialists. The Liz Cheneys of the world, Dick Cheney, Mitt Romney, John McCain was also, all of these people were CFR members. At the same time, that means, of course, that they were by definition internationalists. And what they disliked about Donald Trump was that he was changing their globalist plans. And that's exactly what happened. So the first thing that I want to note about Donald Trump's victory is that this is the first time that we have had a ticket, a solid ticket, Trump and Vance, who do not bow down to the internationalists. As a matter of fact, he promises to drain the swamp, which is filled with Democrats and internationalists in Washington, D.C., and he promises to drain that swamp. This is the first time that we've had a clean ticket without an internationalist on it. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and his America First agenda. Now, when we say America First, that means put America first in everything. That is, we are not obligated. As a matter of fact, it is not constitutionally allowed to send $1 of our money to a foreign nation. But when we talk about that, people tell us, well, that you are isolationists. Let's talk about that for just a moment. It is so sad to me that the left always sets the table. The left always sets the table, like sets the parameters of a debate, and wants us to discuss whether we're going to be internationalist or isolationist, as if those are the only two alternatives. Internationalist or isolationist. Isolationist means we want to stick our heads in the sand, we want to bury ourselves in the sand and ignore the world. That is absolutely foolish. The option for internationalism is not being isolationist. It is non-intervention. Not willing to intervene ourselves around the globe with American blood, sweat, tears, money in order to obtain or maintain freedom for people whom we don't even know in Europe, who have nothing to do with America. I know that we've aligned ourselves on these international treaties in order to, such as NATO, which is an adjunct of the United Nations. But all of those treaties, all of those things, the American people are sick of them. We have spent so much money. It's all draining ourselves completely of our wealth and the financing of America, because that has come about because of the freedom that we enjoy. This is the first time that we have had such a clean ticket with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, not internationalists, and at the same time, non-interventionists. And that's exactly one reason why I voted for Donald Trump. Now, here's something else. This is the first time, as far as I'm aware, that the mainstream media has not controlled the outcome of the election. The mainstream media has controlled, for as long as I have been alive, the outcome of elections. They've, for example, just think back for a moment, the Lyndon Johnson administration, how they portrayed Barry Goldwater. With the media's assistance, they portrayed him as a warmonger and just made everybody afraid. And so they didn't vote for Barry Goldwater from my home state of Arizona, but they voted for Lyndon Johnson. And that's how they portrayed it. That's how they always do it. The media simply, they put up a Democrat, internationalist, or a neocon. And those are the options that we've always had. So we've had George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. Those are the Republicans, but they were neocons. They have the Dick Cheneys of the world. He didn't serve as president, but secretary with George Bush, or vice president rather. So all of these people are internationalists. That's why Liz Cheney. This is why Liz Cheney hates Donald Trump. But the point is that the media has controlled the options on the table. Just like I pointed out, when we have a debate regarding internationalism, the opposite of internationalism and international government is not isolationism, it is non-interventionism. Don't be intervening ourselves in all the affairs of the world. That's the option, not isolationism. But Liz Cheney, what is she? She's an internationalist. And so they tell us that, oh, well, you're an isolationist. No, they just misunderstand it, and they want to set the table. But the mainstream media has done exactly the same thing. They've set the table. They've made the options for us. And this is the first time, to my recollection, that we have had an election, Donald J. Trump, J.D. Vance being victorious, that the media has absolutely been opposed to Donald Trump from top to bottom, side to side. They didn't get to set the table. They didn't put Mitt Romney up there. They didn't put another George Bush up there for the Republicans to vote for. They didn't put a Liz Cheney up there. They would like to have, but this was the first time the mainstream media, so that's why the mainstream media is losing their collective mind right now, and they're saying such wild and crazy things regarding the election. I heard one man say even, well, maybe we can have Kamala Harris be the president for just a short time. We want Joe Biden to give up his office for Kamala Harris for the remaining time that he's there. What a stupid suggestion. Stupid for several reasons. Number one, it was just 2 months ago that when the conservative media, such as the Sean Hannitys of the world, would say that Joe Biden is demented, the left would lose their minds and say, no, he's not. You just hate him. You just hate Joe Biden. Now they're confessing, yeah, he's demented, and he can't even be in office for the next 2 months. It's just so crazy. It's funny, but be that as it may. Now, I want to look at this is an article. And by the way, before I leave all of that, there's something else too. I heard Dana Perino on Fox News on election night I thought was one of the most insightful comments regarding Kamala Harris and her loss. And she pointed out that the Democrats they put her into the place. They removed Joe Biden. They put her into place. She did not have one single vote from the Democratic Party to be their nominee. She didn't go through an election process. She didn't go through any of the processes that people normally go through in order to get on the ticket. She didn't go through that at all. We had the Barack Obamas who simply trying to control things with George Soros behind the scenes, put her on the ticket. But here's what Dana Perino said. She said she didn't go through the media as far as answering questions, tough questions. She didn't go through the election process. There was no testing of her at all. Just like a person going to a weight room. If you've never lifted weights and you go to the weight room, you're not going to be able to do anything or not much. Well, the same thing, because if you don't test yourself and you don't get in there and actually get in some debates and discussions with the mainstream media or the media at all, and hold some press conferences and go through an election process and work it out in debating all the way through it, you're going to be weak as water, and that's exactly what happened. I thought Dana Perino had a great point on that particular element of it. So here's something else, and I want to share this with you. This is from the Gateway Pundit. A good friend of mine, John Kachelman, tells us regarding the victory of Donald Trump. And by the way, before I get into this, I want to make mention of this fact. So I've had several people make comments on some of the past shows that I've had. And some of them have been kind of perturbed about the Palestinian and Israel conflict and some of the comments that I've made. So here's what I want to do. And I'm going to do this in response to what people have asked regarding the background to the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. And how did the state of Israel come to be? What is the biblical position? What is the political position? And what really is the history of it? So coming up within a week, we'll do another show, and that will be the focus of it. So that is in response to several people who have asked the question, what about Israel, Palestine, and how did that all come to be? And what is your position on this? So we'll talk about that in an upcoming show within a week. So this is an article by John Kachelman. And John Kachelman writes on the Gateway Pundit, he says, now is not the time for revenge. Now is the time for justified retribution. Kind of interesting. So he talks about the tsunami of the November 5th national elections that brought joy and good vibes, according to Kamala Harris, to our nation. There is hope that a republic will be brought back from the cusp of its erasure, and that's exactly where we were going into this international globalist government. There is hope that justice will be meted out, individual rights will be restored, and the injustice that has sought to intimidate and ruin citizens will be challenged and corrected by the very rule of law that was suborned. In the midst of national joy and good vibes, one hears the clamor of the ill-contented evil. And these grumblers do not applaud citizens deciding their nation's destiny. These think only the sanctified state elite knows what is best for the individual. These project their evil. The censorious howls betray their guilt. I'm reminded of our down-home common sense truth: the bit dog hollers the loudest. The guilty are always the boisterous ones in their slanderous projections as they feign integrity. But here's the truth that is really exposed, and I want you to think about this. We are being slammed with accusations that all finding joy and good vibes in President Trump's landslide victory and unmistakable national mandate are going to seek revenge on his opponents. Now, I've said many times that the Democrats don't charge the Republicans or conservatives with anything except the things that they are already guilty of, and that's exactly what is taking place right here. This projected evil is magnified in the bit dog slander by suggesting the perps of evil oppression, and they are the innocent victims. Here's the truth, exposing those dedicated to the devilish revenge. The very ones crying out about the unfairness of Republicans in charge are the very ones calling for merciless revenge on political opponents. Do you remember Barack Hussein Obama saying, "We're going to punish our enemies and we're going to reward our friends who stand with us on issues that are important to us"? Punish our enemies. The mainstream media didn't lose it at that point because they're all supportive of Barack Obama. Do you remember Joe Biden regarding the Supreme Court of the United States? Now he says some other people may see or my age rather, see a different story, an American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution. That's not me. Yet his administration is in a constant narrative of revenge seeking to destroy political opponents. Witness the fact that the FBI are not ferreting out enemies of the state, but they're going to those grandmothers who stand on sidewalks opposing abortion clinics. How about AOC promoting the enemies list of Trump supporters? She suggested that people archive the names of Trump supporters. Now get this, archive the names of Trump supporters so they can be held accountable for their behavior. You remember that? Pretty remarkable, isn't it? And an amazing projection of evil upon those she sees as opponents. She says, this is the party of personal responsibility, being upset at the idea of being responsible for the behavior over the last 4 years. She added, now is not the time for revenge, but retribution. These are the statements of Democrats. These are the statements that they have always pushed. Do you remember the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin, making a similar suggestion on archiving political opponents? How about the Trump Accountability Project launched by the Democrats? Do you remember the Trump Accountability Project launched by the Democrats? Listen to their goal of revenge on political opponents. And here's a direct quote from the Trump Accountability Project. But those who took a paycheck from the Trump administration should not profit from their efforts to get to tear our democracy apart. They should not profit, rather, from our efforts to tear our democracy apart. The world should never forget those who, when faced with a decision, chose to put their money, their time, their reputations behind separating children from the families, encouraging racism and anti-Semitism, and negligently causing the unnecessary loss of life and economic devastation from a country's failed response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Don't forget, they say, those who supported Trump. You know, there's not a singular voice projecting the Democrats and the rhinos and the deep staters' evil lust for revenge. Not anyone in the Trump campaign. There's no one in the Trump proposed administration. There's no one that I know in the Republican Party that wants to do. No one's ever said that. Trump has not said that at all. But this is endemic to the Democrat Party. This is how they behave. This is how they have spoken countless times in the past. So let's clarify the actions for just a moment. Kachelman writes this, clarifying the actions. 3 terms apply to a negative conflict resolution. These define a failure resulting in consequent actions. When something is wrong, the following are evident. Unfortunately, the terms and actions are confused and are all seen as immoral. Number one, resentment. What is resentment? It's an emotion that poisons one's soul. It produces bitterness, slander, lies, personal attacks justified by imagined evils, even physical brutality. There's no place for this evil emotion. How about revenge? What is revenge? It is an action that is prodded by bitter resentment. This is framed by selfish pride and arrogance. This leads one to ignore the law, take matters into their own hands. It seeks a justice that is unjust. One seeking revenge is never justified because he will only increase his misery. According to Proverbs 26 and 27, King Solomon wrote, "One who digs a pit will fall into it, and one who rolls a stone, it will come back on him." How about, after we look at the word resentment and revenge, how about the word retribution? It is defined as an action that is justified and essential for civility. This recognizes that actions are wrong and must be corrected. That's retribution. A failure of evil's correction, that is, a failure to correct evil, encourages greater evil. The guardrails for the corrective retribution in our nation is the constitutional rule of law. So let's frame the appropriate retribution. Vindictive resentment destroys civility's compass because it devolves society into anarchy. This is a fact established by a number of sources. And here are three. Number one, the Holy Scriptures establish that evil's wrongdoing must be met not with revenge, but with retribution. Two significant texts emphasize this. Number one, Ecclesiastes 8 and 11. Remember, we're speaking about retribution, setting things right. Ecclesiastes 8:11. This is Solomon. "Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of mankind among them are fully given to do evil." Isaiah 26 and 10. "Though the wicked person is shown compassion, he does not learn righteousness. He deals unjustly in the land of uprightness and does not perceive the majesty of the Lord." That reminds me of this illegal immigration onslaught that we have faced with the Biden administration. And now we have Democrats all over Fox News talking about, well, we can't send out the illegals out of the country. Why not? Why not? Well, we're separating families. All of them need to go. They need to come in the right way. The law, the rule of law should be the rule and not, okay, well, people are here and we just need to leave them here. Civilization, Kachelman writes, has long sought proper retribution. Numerous sociological insights attest to this. Consider specifically the ancient Greek goddess Nemesis. She was worshipped as the goddess of retribution. She was known for dishing out punishments to people and mercilessly targeting those who acquired wealth and status at the expense of the poor. As the goddess of retribution, no sinner or criminal was beyond her reach. Nemesis's actions were believed to maintain balance in the world. So now is not the time for revenge, but retribution, that is, setting things right. Now is the day of reckoning, and that is why people have put Donald Trump back in office. It's not about revenge, but it is about reckoning and setting things right, constitutionally speaking, lawfully speaking, in our country. We're so thankful that God in His providence has given us once again Donald J. Trump as the President of the United States, number 47.